Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Scare Talk Radio 109.8. Tonight, we're going to be looking over the world's most renowned creepypasta. Well, it's the second most renowned creepypasta, but that's besides the point. I think this is one of the most important. It's considered by a lot of people to be the most important creepypasta to the, industry, if you will. It's called Ben Drowned. So it's a video game creepypasta, which usually these are, looked over or they're laughed at or made fun of. Sonic.exe, I'm looking at you. That's, an obvious choice if you're trying to make fun of stuff. But yeah, I mean, this one is so important, and I think that just due to the nature of my channel being so Zelda-centric, I think that we have to look over this. And I think that, there's always, like, new perspectives and such that, you can find in doing lookovers and stuff like that of different videos, different stories and such. But anyways, we're going to do this in 3 separate videos because this is a huge story. Otherwise, we would be probably looking at like a 2-hour long video. So we're going to start today with chapter 1, and we're going to read through that. Next video will be chapter 2, and then the third video obviously will be chapter 3. So we're going to dive straight in. I recently moved into my dorm room starting as a sophomore in college, and a friend of mine gave me his old N64 to play. I was stoked, to say the least. I could finally play all of those old games from my youth that I hadn't touched in at least a decade. His Nintendo 64 came with one yellow controller and a rather shoddy copy of Super Smash Bros. And while beggars can't be choosers, needless to say, it didn't take long until I became bored of beating up the computer players. That weekend, I decided to drive around a few neighborhoods about 20 minutes or so off campus, hitting up the local garage sales, hoping to score on some deals from ignorant parents. I ended up picking up a copy of Pokemon Stadium, GoldenEye, F-Zero, and 2 controllers for $2. Satisfied, I began to drive out of the neighborhood when one house caught my attention. I still have no idea why. There were no cars, there was only one table set up with some random junk on it, but something sort of drew me there. I usually trust my gut on these things, so I got out of the car and was greeted by an old man. His outward appearance was, for lack of a better word, displeasing. It was odd. If you asked me to tell you why I thought he was displeasing, I couldn't really pinpoint anything. There's just something about him that put me on edge. I can't explain it. All I can tell you is that if it wasn't in the middle of the afternoon and there weren't other people within shouting distance, I would not have even thought about approaching this guy. He flashed a crooked smile at me and asked what I was looking for. And immediately, I noticed that he must be blind in one of his eyes. His right eye had that glazed-over look about it. I forced myself to look to his left eye instead, trying not to offend, and asked him if he had any old video games. I was already wondering how I could politely excuse myself from the situation, when he would tell me that he had no idea what a video game was. But to my surprise, he said he had a few ones in an old box. He assured me he'd be back in a jiffy, and turned back to head into the garage. As I watched him hobble away, I couldn't help but notice what he was selling on this table. Littered across the table were rather peculiar paintings. Various artworks that looked like ink blots that a psychiatrist might show you. Curious, I looked through them. It was obvious why nobody was visiting this guy's garage sale. There weren't exactly aesthetically pleasing items here. As I came to the last one, for some reason, it almost looked like Majora's Mask. The same heart body shape with little spikes protruding outward. Initially, I just thought that since I was secretly hoping to find that game at these garage sales, some Freudian bullshit was projecting itself into the ink blots. But given the events that happened afterwards, I'm not so sure now. I should have asked the man about it, and I wish I would have, but something just kept me from doing that. After staring at the Majora-shaped blot, I looked up and the old man was suddenly there again, arm's length in front of me, smiling at me. I'll admit I jumped out of reflex and I laughed nervously as he handed me an N64 cartridge. It was the standard gray color, except that someone had written Majora on it in a black permanent marker. I got butterflies in my stomach as I realized what a coincidence this was, and asked him how much he wanted for it. The old man smiled at me and told me that I could have it for free, that it used to belong to a kid who was about my age that didn't live here anymore. There was something weird about how the man phrased that, but I didn't really pay any attention to it then. I was too caught up in not only finding this game, but getting it for free. I reminded myself to be a bit skeptical since this looked like a pretty shady cartridge, and there's no guarantee it would work. But then the optimist inside me interjected that maybe it was some kind of beta version or pirated version of the game, and that was all I needed to be back on Cloud 9. I thanked the man, and the man smiled at me and wished me well, saying, "Goodbye then." At least, that's what I thought it sounded like to me. All the way in the car ride home, I had a nagging doubt that the man said something else. My fears were confirmed when I booted up the game. To my surprise, it worked just fine. And there was one saved file simply named Ben. Goodbye, Ben. He was saying goodbye, Ben. I feel bad for the man, obviously a grandparent and obviously going senile, and I, for some reason or another, reminded him of his grandson, Ben. Okay, so that puts the first tally on, the story here is like the first sort of thing that happens, like a prologue almost to what's to come. But basically, yeah, you got like your sort of standard setup here. You got this young college kid who wants to get back to some games he used to play from his childhood, and he wants to play Majora's Mask for whatever reason. It's an old game. It's a cult classic. But it sets itself up very nice in that sort of way, like something that is very practical. That anybody could really experience. You want to get back into an old video game. You want to do like some retro nostalgia type stuff, and you go to pick up games at like a garage sale. That used to be a big thing back in the day. Nowadays it's not really, because if there's any sort of even resemblance of it being a retro fucking video game, it is already picked up by the time that you even arrive to this garage sale. They've already realized what's going on. They've put it up on eBay or some shit. Like there's no finding a like copy of F-Zero for the N64 at a garage sale for $2. Like that's not real. Not nowadays, but back then, very real. So it's almost nostalgic in that sort of sense, but it also still plants itself in reality of what could have happened back in this sort of day. So I really like how that's set up there. It really sort of gives you this human aspect to it, but is already sort of planting up a little bit of an ominousness. So yeah, but let's get into where he actually opens up the game, because that's where the interesting shit happens. Out of curiosity, I looked at the save file. Eyeballing it, I could tell that he was pretty far in the game. He had almost all of the masks, and 3 out of 4 remains of the bosses. I noticed that he had used an owl statue to save his game. He was on day 3 and by the Stone Tower Temple with hardly an hour left before the moon would crash. I remember thinking that it was a shame that he had come so close to beating the game, but he had never finished it. I made a new save file named Link out of tradition, and started the game, ready to relive my childhood. For such a shady-looking game cartridge, I was surprised at how smoothly it ran. Literally just like a retail copy of the game, save for a minor few hiccups here and there, like textures being where they shouldn't be, random flashes of cutscenes at odd intervals, but nothing too bad. However, the only thing that was a little unnerving was that at times the NPCs would call me Link, and then at other times they would call me Ben. I figured that it was just a bug, a fluke in the programming causing our files to get mixed up or something. It did kind of creep me out though after a while. It was around after I had beaten the Woodfall Temple that I regrettably went into the save files and deleted Ben. I had intended to preserve the save file just out of respect for the game's original owner. It's not like I needed 2 save files anyways. Hoping that this would resolve the problem, I deleted it anyways. And it did and it didn't. Now NPCs wouldn't call me anything. Where my name should be in the dialogue, there was just a blank space. My save file name was still Link. Frustrated, and with homework to do, I put the game down for a day. I started playing the game again last night, getting the lens of truth and working my way towards completing the Snowhead Temple. Now, some of you more hardcore Majora's Mask fans know about the 4th day glitch. For those of you who don't, you can Google it. But the gist is, right as the clock is about to hit 0 on the final day, you talk to the astronomer and look through the telescope. If you time it right, the countdown disappears and you essentially have another day to finish what you were doing. Deciding to do the glitch to try and finish the Snowhead Temple, I happened to get it right on the first try, and the time counter at the bottom disappeared. However, when I pressed B to exit the telescope, instead of being greeted by the astronomer, I found myself in the Majora boss fight room at the end of the game, the trippy, boxed-in arena. Staring at Skull Kid hovering above me, there is no sound, just him floating in the air above me, and the background music, which was regular for the arena, but still creepy. Immediately my palms began to sweat. This was definitely not normal. Skull Kid never appeared here. I tried moving around the area, and no matter where I went, Skull Kid would always be facing me, looking at me, not saying anything. Not much would happen, though. And this kept up, or nothing would happen. This kept up for around 60 seconds. I thought the game had bugged or something, but I was just beginning to doubt that very much. I was about to reach for the reset button when text appeared on my screen. You're not sure why, but you apparently had a reservation. I instantly recognized that text. You get that message when you get the room key from Anju at the Stockpot Inn. But why was it playing here? I refused to entertain the notion that it was almost as if the game was trying to communicate with me. I started navigating the room again, testing to see if it was some sort of trigger that enabled me to interact with something here. Then I realized how stupid I was. To even think that someone could reprogram the game like this was absurd. Sure enough, 15 seconds later, another message appeared on the screen. And again, like the first one, it was an already pre-existing phase. Go to the layer of the temple's boss? Yes or no? I paused for a second, contemplating what I should press, and how the game would react, when I realized that I couldn't select no. Taking a deep breath, I pressed yes, and the screen faded to white, with the words, Dawn of a New Day, and the subtext, beneath it. Where I was ported to filled me with the most intense sense of dread and impending fear I had ever experienced. The only way I can describe the way I felt here is having this feeling of inexplicable depression on a profound scale. I'm normally not a depressed person, but the way I felt here was a feeling that I didn't even know existed. It was such a twisted, powerful presence that seemed to wash over me. Alright, so we're going to take a stop there again and just kind of go over what we just went over, or just read over here. So it starts to sort of build up, right? So he starts the game. He notices a few weird things. Obviously, Kid has a save file in the game that died. And the game was already shady to begin with. But he starts playing it on a new save file, and he's noticing that kid's name's appearing instead of his sometimes, and, random texture glitches and stuff like that. So, yet again, sort of these subtle things that build up and make it, more believable, in a lot of ways. Just like random little game things that you could expect to happen. Not necessarily for like a Nintendo game, which, that sort of wipes away a little bit of the belief while you're reading this or watching this. But something that could happen in like a Bethesda game or something like that, where there are actually glitches. Anywho, I'll stop glazing here. But he starts to talk about like little things like the 4th day glitch and stuff like that, which also sort of adds some of that realism and close to homeness that makes you just believe his story more and more. That's one of the main things too. Like if you really want to make a creepypasta or like a scary story like this and make it believable, you have to add in a lot of that grounded in reality or things that will make people sort of believe in what you're saying. It's a tactic that a lot of people use whenever they're giving their testimonies when they're on trial or something like that, or if they're like a witness that's just trying to help out somebody. They're gonna throw in these little beats of truth and maybe like childhood sort of rumors or like local folklore like type rumors that are going to make their stories seem more believable, so that way people won't look at the lies that they are telling that you can clearly see. I appeared in some kind of weird twilight zone of Clocktown. I walked out of the clock tower, as you normally do when you start from day one, only to find that all of the inhabitants were gone. Usually with the 4th day glitch, you can still find the guards and the dog that runs around outside the tower, but this time they were all gone. What replaced them was this ominous feeling that there was something out there, in the same area as me, and it was watching me. I had 4 hearts to my name and the hero's bow, but at this point, I wasn't even considering my avatar. I was just feeling that I was in some type of personal danger. Perhaps the most chilling thing was the music. It was a song of healing, ripped straight from the game itself, but it was played in reverse. The music would get louder, building up as if you should expect something to pop out at you, but it never did, and the constant loop began to wear on my mental state. Every now and then I would hear the faint laugh of the happy mask salesman in the background, just quiet enough so that I wasn't sure if I was just hearing things, but just loud enough to keep me determined to find them. I looked in all 4 zones of Clocktown only to find nothing. No one. Textures were missing. West Clocktown had me walking on air. The entire area felt broken, hopelessly broken. As the reverse song of healing repeated for what must have been the 50th time, I just remember standing in the middle of South Clocktown, realizing that I had never felt so alone in a video game before. As I walked through the ghost town, I don't know whether it was the combination of the out-of-place textures and the atmosphere, and the haunting medley of the once peaceful and soothing song being butchered and distorted, but I was literally on the verge of tears and I had no idea why. I hardly ever cry. Something had gripped me here, and this powerful sense of depression that was both foreign and crippling came over me. I tried leaving Clocktown, but every time I attempted to zone out, the screen would fade to black and I would just zone into another part of Clocktown. I tried playing my ocarina. I wanted to escape, and I did not want to be here. But every time I played the Song of Time or Song of Soaring, it would only say, "Your notes echo so far," but nothing happens. By this point, it was obvious the game didn't want me to leave, but I had no idea why it was keeping me here. I didn't want to go inside the buildings, for I felt that I would be too vulnerable there to whatever I was afraid of. I don't know why, but I came up with the idea that if I drowned myself at the laundry pool, I could spawn somewhere else and leave this place. As I zoned in and ran towards the pool, that's when it happened. Link grabbed his head and the screen flashed for a brief moment of the happy mask salesman smiling at me. Not Link, me, with Skull Kid's scream playing in the background, and when the screen returned, I was staring at the Link statue from playing the song of Elegy of Emptiness. I screamed as the thing just stared back at me with that haunting facial expression. I turned back and ran out and back into South Clocktown, and to my horror, the fucking statue followed me, and the only way I can compare this is like the weeping angels from Doctor Who. Ever so often, at random intervals, the animation would play of the statue appearing behind me. It was like the thing was chasing me, or dare I even say it, fucking haunting me. By this point, I was on the verge of hysterics, but not even once did I think of the thought of turning off the console. I don't know why, I was just so wrapped up in it. The terror felt so real. I tried to shake the statue, but it would literally appear behind me every single time. Link started to make weird animations I've never seen him do before. He'd flail his arms around or spasm randomly, and the screen would cut to the happy mask salesman smiling for a brief moment before I was face to face with that fucking statue again. I ended up running into the Swordmaster's dojo and ran to the back. I don't know why, but in my panic, I just wanted some kind of assurance that I'm not alone here. To my dismay, I found no one, but as I turned to leave, the statue cornered me in the cubby in the back. I tried attacking the statue with my sword, but to no avail. Confused and backed into a corner, I just stared at the statue, waiting for it to kill me. Suddenly, the screen flashed to the happy salesman again, and Link turned to face my screen, standing upright, mirroring the statue, looking at me along with his copy, literally staring at me. Whatever was left of the 4th wall was completely shattered, while I ran out of the dojo terrified. Suddenly, the game warped me to an underground tunnel, and the reverse song of healing queued up again as I was given a brief moment of rest before the statue started peering behind me again. This time aggressively. I could only take a few steps before it would summon behind me again. I hurriedly made my way out of the tunnel and appeared in southern Clocktown. As I run aimlessly, in a sheer panic, suddenly a re-dead screamed and the screen faded to black as Dawn of a New Day and I appeared again. The screen faded in and I was standing on top of Clock Tower with Skull Kid hovering over me again, silent. I looked up and the moon was staring back. And the moon was back, looming just meters above my head. But the Skull Kid was just staring at me hauntingly with that fucking mask. A new song was playing. The Stone Tower Temple theme played in reverse. In some sort of desperate attempt, I equipped the bow and fired off a shot at the Skull Kid. It actually hit him, and it played an animation of him reeling back. I fired again, and on the third arrow, a text box appeared saying, "That won't do you any good, hee hee." And I was picked up off the ground, levitated upwards on my back, and then Link screamed as he burst into flames, instantly killing him. I jumped when this happened. I had never seen this move used by anyone in the game, and Skull Kid himself didn't have any moves. As the death scream played, my lifeless body still burning, the Skull Kid laughed and the screen faded to black, only to have me reappear in the same place. I decided to charge him, but the same thing happened. Link's body was lifted off the ground by some unknown force, and he immediately burst into flames again, killing him. This time during the death scene, the faint sounds of this reverse song of healing could be heard. On my third and final try, I noticed there was no music playing this time. All there was eerie silence. I remember that in the original counter with the Skull Kid, you were supposed to use the ocarina to either travel back in time or summon the giants. I attempted to play the Song of Time, but before I could hit the last note, Link's body once again exploded into flames. As the death screen neared its end, it began to chug as if the cartridge was trying to process a lot of something. When the screen came to, it was the same scene as the first 3 times, except this time Link was lying on the ground dead in a position I've never seen in the game before. His head tilted towards the camera, with the Skull Kid floating above him. I couldn't move, I couldn't press any buttons. All I could do is just stare at Link's dead body. After about 30 seconds of this, the game simply fades out with the message, "You've met a terrible fate, haven't you?" before kicking you out to the title screen. So for this portion of the video, or the story if you will, it really just ramps itself up, once he starts his new save file. Obviously, he's starting to experience irregularities with the game, textures being mixed up, people calling him Ben instead of his actual character name. And then once he deletes the Ben save file is where everything just immediately ruptures to shit. He starts getting followed by the statue. He starts getting teleported to the clock tower, getting teleported to this dark tunnel and all of these other things. It's just sort of a testament to where you began this story. You have just barely, much going on. It seems like it's kind of a normal game. Maybe a few issues here and there since it's obviously been beaten up a bit, or it's like a pirated version. But then, take away that grounded in reality. Now you have just actual, supernatural shit sort of going on. That's, obviously very terrifying and troubling for you to witness, being somebody that just wants to play your favorite game. But it gets worse. It gets way worse. So let's continue on. Upon getting back to this title screen and starting again, I noticed my save file was no longer there. It was replaced with "Your turn. Your turn." Had 3 hearts, 0 masks, and no items. I selected "Your turn," and immediately when I did, I was returned to the clock tower rooftop scene of my Link dead and the Skull Kid hovering over, with the Skull Kids laughing, looping again and again. I quickly hit the reset button, and when the game booted up again, there was one more save file added. "Your turn," or below "Your turn," entitled Ben. Ben's save file was right back where it was before I deleted it, and the Stone Tower Temple with the moon almost crashing. I turned the game off at that point. I'm not superstitious, but this is way too fucked up even for me. I haven't played it at all today. Hell, I didn't even get any sleep last night. I kept hearing the reverse Song of Healing music in my head, and just remembering the sense of dread I felt exploring Clocktown. I drove back to the old man's house today to ask him some questions with a buddy of mine. No way I was going to go there alone. Only to find that there's a for sale sign in the front yard, and when I rang the doorbell, there was no one home. I'm writing this down with the rest of my thoughts and recording what happened. Sorry if some of this has grammatical errors and whatnot. I'm running on no sleep here. I'm terrified of this game. Even more so now that I relived it a second time writing this all down. But I feel like there's still more to it than meets the eye, and that there's something calling me to investigate this further. I think Ben is something in this equation, but I don't know what, and if I couldn't get a hold of the man, then I would want to get some answers. I need a day or so to recuperate before tackling this game again. It's already taken a toll on my sanity, I feel like, but next time I do this, I'm going to be recording my footage all the way through. The idea to record only came to me towards the end, so you see the last few minutes of what I saw, including Skull Kid and the Elegy statue. It's on YouTube here. So that reaches us at the end of chapter 1. So, obviously, at this point, the game is pretty much telling him, Ben is here to stay. You're not going to get rid of Ben. But not only that, the game is also telling him, like, you're next, basically. Your turn, adding in this save file. It's very interesting how the game's, sort of fucking with old Jaduzable here, if you will. But, yeah. So that's chapter 1. We're going to be doing chapters 2 and 3 in the coming weeks. We'll see. But let me know what you guys think. Personally, I'm sort of engaged at this point. The game has definitely gripped me, but we're going to end up going over chapters 2 and 3 and just sort of finishing out the story, at least the original. There is actually 2 other Ben Drowned sequels that are there now, so it's an actual trilogy. So who even knows? We could get to those at some point, but let me know what you guys think. And this has been Scare Talk 109.8. Thank you for stopping in.